All right, that should be working. Yes.
I was just going to ask, was the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism withdrawn?
Not that I heard. I know that, there's still debate and discussion in many different communities of whether it's the most appropriate or not. But I haven't heard that they had changed their definition, well, at least not recently.
Yeah, I clicked on the link today and it didn't work. And a few days ago, I know it did, just because it came up.
Well, exactly. The topic came up recently again. But I had not heard that there was any formal decision to change anything.
Yeah, and I Googled it. I didn't hear any formal decisions either, but the link no longer works on the White House website.
Well, I mean, during the transition, it wouldn't be surprising if a number of things are in flux, to say the least. I know there was a misprint by the State Department website a few days before or during last week, when it said that Donald Trump had already left office. So, yeah, there have definitely been mistakes and errors in how the websites are handled. I wouldn't take it as any writing on the wall unless there's an official declaration.
And when I Googled it, the only thing that I could find was something from the Jewish Federation urging Biden to adopt the IHRA definition.
Which sounds like perfectly normal lobbying.
Yeah, well, it said to adopt instead of to keep it.
Well, I think, it's a question of adoption may not be the right word. It might be more to embrace the current definition as used by the government.
Right. So I just thought it sounded.
But that doesn't fit really well in a headline, does it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. I just noticed it went down.
I try not to read too much into how websites work. I know our own website is finicky at times, and I would hate for anyone to try and be reading that as some indication of TI policy or intent.
Yeah, but they have a much bigger tech budget.
You'd think they would, and I'm sure that they do have an absolute value, a much larger tech budget, but that doesn't mean that errors don't still happen. That doesn't mean that there aren't still glitches. And that doesn't mean that they actually have the budget they need to do all the things they're trying to do. I know the State Department specifically is perennially underfunded compared to the good that it's capable of doing.
You'd be surprised how well those federal bureaus are funded. They eclipse the state system.
I would expect. When you're doing the work of 50 states rather than one, that kind of makes sense. But I also know that the State Department is often unable to engage in many programs around the world that would probably be beneficial to us.
Yeah. Well, I know like the judiciary, the state judges might have one clerk for 4 judges. At the federal system, it's pretty much flipped. One judge has like 3 or 4 clerks. So.
Yeah.
I even talked to the judges who came from the state system, and they flat out tell me we are much more funded than the state judges.
I would expect so. I mean, that's not surprising. I don't think it's a question of whether they're overfunded. It's a question more of whether the states are underfunded. Just adjust camera there. All right, we're going to give it another minute. Was hoping a few more of our regulars would log in because I don't want them to miss our fun discussion. Silence that.
Someone also said that the DOJ's tech budget alone is $1 billion.
Well, I mean, the Department of Justice absolutely should. I mean, is that just for defending their own website and maintaining it, or does that also involve, parts of what they do in terms of security analysis, investigations, and other things?
I think that was just for. I think they were just talking about like the prosecutor's office, just to run the office's security system and stuff, not for the investigative analysis and stuff.
Right, but I would expect them to have among the most rigorous of security systems for their technology. That's not where you want to breach. All right, well, that's a normal 5-minute buffer. Let's go ahead and get things underway. And those who come a little bit late, well, they can catch up. Sorry, I've got my own little notes down here at the bottom of my screen because it gets complicated tonight. I know for the first chapter and a half, it's already been complicated in the Yevamot. You may remember, those of you who have studied for a while through the Mishnah with me, that in previous Masechtot sections of Mishnah, I have said, well, this is Levirate marriage. And well, Levirate marriage gets complicated. Well, Levirate marriage, that's a topic for another day. Yeah, more or less, but it can be different in situations. I always was hedging my bets because this is insanely complicated. But now that we're doing it properly, I can't hedge bets anymore. We've got to dive into it. And if you think what we've done so far is complicated, well, today it's complicated in a different way. It's not that the law in and of itself is that bizarre. It's that the family situations are creating a system of doubt that needs to be resolved. And the way it's being resolved may seem a little difficult to fully process. With that in mind, I'm actually going to use some visual references later on. So we're going to read the text first. I'm going to give it a general explanation, and then we're going to jump to some visual aids. Just a reminder as well that this is an extreme case, to say the least, and one that we would not expect would happen with any frequency at all, if ever. But like we've talked about before, when the rabbis use extreme cases, oftentimes it is in order to highlight some of the liminal points. Where does the law actually change from one ruling to another ruling? How far in do you have to zoom to find an exceptional case where the law will split on a particular topic in a way that will teach you something about the overall topic as a whole? So hopefully you'll put up with our discussion tonight with that in mind, even if it is a near impossible scenario. All right, so we are in chapter 2, Mishnah number 6. By the way, this translation is a slightly different one than we've been using. I want to use this one tonight, however, because it gives more explanation built into the sentences, which I think is helpful. As much as I'm a purist and like to be as close to the original Mishnah text as possible, I recognize that those sentences were written as notes to remind a student who'd already studied it, not to explain it for the first-time student. However, this translation, like many modern translations, keeps the translated words, the ones that are close to the original text, in bold type, and the inserted notes and explanation words are in the lighter font. So I'll be reading both together, but just recognize the bold is as close as you get to the original Mishnah text in English. In the case of one who betrothed one of two sisters and does not know which of them he betrothed, so that both are forbidden to him. So basic situation here, and this is bizarre, it is strange. You have a guy, and he said, I am getting married to her. And he offered the ring to her. But she was wearing a bag over her head, or she was behind a door, or she was in some other way masked so that he was not able to properly identify her. So now he knows he married one of the sisters, but he's not sure, he knows he's engaged, which remember is a higher level of commitment than it is in modern American usage. He is engaged to one of them, but he's not sure which. This creates a problem because you are not allowed to marry your wife's sister. So if he marries the right one, that would be fine. But if he married the wrong one, meaning if he married the sister of the woman he actually was betrothed to, then he would be violating that rule. So therefore, since each of them could be the one that he's not supposed to get married, and he has no way of telling which, and that's part of the hypothetical. Don't ask me, why couldn't they tell him? Why couldn't this, that? This is built as a hypothetical around the fact that he doesn't know, okay? Don't tell me how it could have been avoided and how it could have been fixed. Of course it could have been avoided. Of course it could have been fixed. The rabbis are not talking about a common problem. They are talking about a specifically constructed thought experiment to teach us something. So he can't tell which is which. He has to divorce. Sorry, he gives a bill of divorce to this one and a bill of divorce to that one due to the uncertainty. All right, so scenario number one, he has to divorce them both. He literally will write them a get, the divorce document, and he will make it out to sister one, and he will make it out to sister two, and that way he avoids the problem. I'm going to pop over to my other screen to show you what this looks like, just to get you used to the icons I'm using.
Rabbi.
All right. Now, just a second. Let me just do the quick visual. By the way, this is using software that I do with our teenagers for their D&D game. That's why everything has kind of a weird fantasy flair to it, but it was the easiest way for me to lay it out in advance. So we have our groom over here, right? And the groom gets married to sister one or sister two. He doesn't know which. Therefore, he has to divorce both of them, give them both a get in order for them to be freed. All right, I'm going to pop back to our original text so that we can continue. But first, Aaron, your question.
Hey, just out of curiosity, couldn't that confusion happen if he betrothed them with an agent?
The confusion can happen through all sorts of ways.
But they could be betrothed through the agent, though, right?
That would be a way. In some way, shape, or form, he has gotten married to one of the two, and in some way, shape, or form, it is impossible for him to know which. It could have been through an agent. It could have been because one of them was a ventriloquist. It could have been because he was, had a bag over his head at the time. We can come up with any possible ways of making this happen. That's not what the rabbis are asking about. What they're asking about is what happens once this situation has begun. And that is why we are now trying to sort it out. So this is the easy situation, right? So let's make sure everybody's got that. One guy gets married to one of two sisters, but he cannot identify which of the two. Just a hypothetical, don't get hung up on that. When that happens, he has to give them both a get, even though he's only engaged to them, right? And that's because to get married to one of them would be to get married to his future wife's sister, and that's not allowed. And since he can't tell which is which, they are both potentially his future wife's sister. They must get dissolved. Remember as well, in case you're still hung up in the hypothetical of what this could mean, if that happened, there was nothing to stop him from then really carefully re-proposing to the one he wants to get married to and going through with the marriage in the more normal fashion. So this is not the end of true love. It can be saved. It's just a little bit of an inconvenience. Okay, that's scenario one, the simple version. But now, scenario two, where it gets more complicated. If the man who had betrothed one of these women, so we're still dealing with one guy betrothed to one woman, but he's not sure which. If that guy died before he could give a bill of divorce, so he realized his mistake, of course, or maybe nobody knows which one he meant, but in any event, he's dead and he didn't give them a get. What do we do? And he had one brother, and as we're going to see, just one brother. That brother performs chalitza with both of them. But, as the commentary points out, he may not take either in levirate marriage. Explanation, this is because he does not know which woman is his Yevamot, which woman is the actual wife of his brother, and which is forbidden to him as the sister of a woman with whom he has the levirate bond. Remember, as soon as his brother dies, the woman that was in fact his wife, even though we don't know which one, automatically gets engaged to the brother. And that engagement can only be dissolved either by chalitza, the ceremony with the shoe, or with the actual marriage through the levirate process. Since we don't know which is which girl is which, he has to do chalitza with both of them to free himself and to free both of them. And we're going to go back to our D&D software to see what that looks like. And so far, it may be easy to keep track of. That's okay. It's going to get harder. Right? So we're again back with our groom, only this time he's dead. And he got married to either sister one or sister two. We don't know which. So brother one, and he's only got one brother, has to do chalitza with both of the two sisters. Everyone following so far? All right. So far, it's almost easy.
But if a brother makes a chalitza to both of them, so it's the same situation.
Well, it's the same situation in that he is now freed and they're both freed.
Okay.
But the possibility of doing yibum, of doing the levirate marriage, is now zero. Okay. However, case number 3, beginning with if here. Again, the lighter print is the commentary, the bold print is the actual translation. If the man who betrothed one of these women had 2 brothers, and again, we're still dealing with he dies before he should have given the get, had 2 brothers. One of them performs chalitza with one of the sisters, but he may not enter into levirate marriage with her due to the possibility that she is the sister of a woman with whom he has a levirate bond. Right? Just like in scenario 2, when we had only one brother, in this scenario, the first brother doing chalitza has to do chalitza because otherwise he could be marrying the wrong one and marrying the sister of somebody that he's actually engaged to through the levirate system. However, and one, meaning the other brother, takes the other, meaning the other woman for whom chalitza wasn't done, in levirate marriage if he so desires. Right? That is his prerogative. So just like as usual, which means we're going to pop back to our other picture, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, they tell me. So groom 1 dies. He was married to one of these ladies. Brother 1 does chalitza with sister 1. Brother 2 goes ahead and marries sister 2 through the levirate process. So we end up with an actual marriage in this situation.
So why not brother 1 make chalitza after brother 2 married with sister 2? Why not brother 1 married with sister 1?
Okay. So the question is, if brother 1 did chalitza with sister 1,
correct,
then why can't brother 1 get married to sister 2? Was that your question?
Yes, and brother 2 can marry sister 1.
Oh, and why can't brother 2 get married to sister 1?
Yes, because now you know that there's no way that any of the brothers can marry both sisters at the same time. So now it's okay.
Okay, so there's a couple of reasons why the rabbis have this as the solution. And again, it's hypothetical. It's not necessarily reflecting a real situation. So when brother 1 does chalitza with sister 1, that dissolves potentially a bond. Remember, she may not actually be the Yevamot. She may not actually be the groom's bride. It could be that she was just the groom's bride's sister. So it's potentially getting rid of the levirate bond, but it hasn't necessarily gotten rid of the levirate bond. The levirate bond could still exist with sister number 2. So brother number 2 marrying sister number 2 will fulfill that levirate bond. So that would be the simple case. However, what happens if brother number 1 does chalitza with sister number 1 and she actually was the Yevamot? She really was the girl that the groom was trying to marry. Well, Nothing wrong there. Their relationship has now been resolved. She is freed, he is freed, and brother 2 is also free to marry sister 2. Now, technically, this marriage would not be an official levirate marriage in the abstract sense of from the infinite wisdom of the universe looking down with all knowledge, but from within the knowledge confines of this family, it is perfectly fine. Because now that there's been chalitza done on sister 1, there's no chance that when he marries sister 2, he's marrying the sister of a woman that's still bound to him through the levirate bond to his deceased brother. Does that make sense? Okay. So, just to make life a little fun, however, since all of this is built around this issue of doubt, because all of this is embedded within this, I'm not sure which woman was which, we end up with a very interesting ruling at the end. If the 2 brothers married the 2 sisters before consulting the court, right? They didn't ask the rabbi what to do. They just said, oh, look, our brother died. We know he was married to one of them. Hey, you take number 1, I'll take number 2. We've got our bases covered that way. Right? They go for a intuitive, but wrong, solution to the problem. What happens? Well, the court does not remove them, meaning from their marriage, and they are permitted to remain married. After all, the couple who performed levirate marriage second was even permitted to do so, since there was no longer any doubt about the levirate bond. When the first 2 get married, it is clear then that the second one would not be in violation of the first one's bond, and therefore his marriage is fine. But the first marriage, you might still be thinking, but wait a minute, isn't there a chance that the first couple that got married, there's at least like a 50-50 chance that that was the sister of the one with the levirate bond? So shouldn't that be inappropriate? That's why we went through the entire rigmarole of scenario number 3. Of one doing chalitza and one marrying the other one. However, the rabbis point out in further commentary and discussion, yes, but since this is a situation of doubt, we are not going to say that the marriage itself is illegitimate. It's not the right thing to do from the outset, but it is not a forbidden union because it only might be, because there is only this layer of doubt. And therefore, we would allow that marriage, both of those marriages, to stand. Aaron, question?
Yes, Rabbi. In that situation, if they both have children, which one belongs to the first brother?
I have no idea. I would say that off the top of my head, from what else I know in Yevamot, that it would probably be the child that was born first. Would be considered to be the heir of the deceased. But I cannot swear to that because that is a detail of discussion that I do not remember having studied.
And Rabbi, since there's doubt, they're not mamzers, right?
Correct, right. There's no issue with the status of the children that come out of this. They are not considered to be born from a forbidden relationship. All right. That was the easy one. Now we get into Mishnah number 7. And stretch your brain. Furthermore, in the case of 2 unrelated men who betrothed 2 sisters, right? So forget a little bit about what we just did. The topics are okay, but forget the family. Right? We now have a new family. We've got groom 1 and groom 2, and groom 1 and groom 2 are not related. Right? They are not brothers. It's just random Joe Schmo and random John Smith. Right? Totally unrelated guys. They get married to 2 sisters. So the 2 brides are definitely, again, remember, this is betrothal, not actually finalizing the marriage. Then you know who your wife was. Right? They are each engaged to two sisters, but if this one does not know which sister he betrothed, then that one does not know which sister he betrothed. This one gives 2 bills of divorce, 1 to each woman, and that one gives 2 bills of divorce, 1 to each woman. So again, let me go back to my wonderful fantasy world explanation. All right, so again, we've got groom 1, groom 2. They are not related, but we have sister 1, sister 2. Groom 2 has to give a divorce to sister 2 and to sister 1, and groom 1 has to give a divorce to sister 1 and sister 2. Because both of them are unsure which, they each follow the rules that we saw for scenario number 1 in our last Mishnah, in Mishnah 6, which is if you're not sure which, you have to divorce them both. Once again, in the hypothetical world, love could still prevail, the divorces go through, and now each of them are actually free to marry the person they want, hopefully in a nice, brightly lit room where there's no doubt about who they are. Okay.
What does it mean that they don't know who will be the Yevamot? What does it mean that they don't know? Like the court knows who is next in between the sisters.
No. See, that's exactly the hypothetical issue that's here, right? And I think just before you came in, I was explaining this may have no real world application, but this whole hypothetical, this whole mind experiment is based off the idea that each of them got married or engaged to one of the sisters. They're sure it's one of them, but they're not sure which one. So, think about it as, he saw them from a distance and he said, take this and give it to her, but then he didn't realize which one was being given, or he was talking to the father and he thought he was talking about the older, but really he meant the younger, and the father thought he was talking about the younger, but he meant the older, right? So it's a case of mistaken identities. You could make an entire sitcom out of this, but it's pretty unrealistic, like most sitcoms. So the issue here in the first scenario of Mishnah 7 is 2 different guys marry 2 sisters. Each of them have to divorce both sisters, and then both guys and sisters are free to marry whoever they want. That's the easy version. But now we are going to introduce death, which is what's going to bring us back to Yevamot, back to levirate marriage. If the 2 men died before they divorced, and this one had a brother and that one had a brother, so now each of the grooms have a brother. So this brother performs chalitza with both of them, and that brother performs chalitza with both of them. So let's just go back and we'll see the picture for that. It's pretty straightforward so far. Right, just like we had before, groom 1 and groom 2 have both died. They don't know who they were married to. So brother 1, that's the brother of groom 1, he performs chalitza with both women. And brother 2, he performs chalitza with both women. And just like scenario 2 we saw in Mishnah number 6. They're not sure which is which, so they have to do chalitza with both, or else they could be accidentally marrying the sister of the woman who they are really bound to by levirate marriage. All right, that should be quite familiar from Mishnah number 6. Okay. Let's make sure I pick up on the right spot. There's a lot of very similar language here, right? If this one had 1 brother and that one had 2 brothers, now we add an extra element. The single brother performs chalitza with both of them, as is normal. And of the 2 brothers, meaning the 2 brothers from groom number 2, one performs chalitza and one performs levirate marriage if he so desires. So we pop back over. I move down to the more complicated version. And I'm not sure I updated my pictures here. Hold on a second. There we go. Groom 1, groom 2 both die. They were married to one of the 2 sisters each. Brother 1, that is the brother of groom 1, he's the only brother of that guy. He does chalitza with both women. Hold on, I guess we can make this picture equal to what we did before. He does chalitza with both women. Whereas brother 2A, that is to say the brother of groom 2, brother number A, or brother letter A, brother A, we'll just call him, he does chalitza with sister number 1, and brother 2, that is to say brother 2B, the second brother of groom 2, he will marry sister number 2. Now, this is following the same pattern that we saw in the scenario number 3 in Mishnah number 6, where again, once brother number 2 does chalitza with one of the sisters, it frees up the system to allow brother number 2 to do levirate marriage with sister number 2. Aaron, yes.
Yes, Rabbi. With brother number 2, when he performs the levirate marriage, is there doubt as to whether or not that's actually a levirate marriage, and does that make a difference?
So yes, there is actually doubt, and it does not make a functional difference except for why, just a second, why if they marry the sisters before consulting the court does not remove them from the marriage and they are not told to divorce them. So the doubt still allows it to be, we're not sure, and we're not going to break up the marriages if they went ahead and did it. So yes, there is.
No, but I meant 2A, the one where they say they can marry. There's still doubt, but the court is saying you can do it, right?
Of course. And it will be treated like a levirate marriage. So one of the things that is often misunderstood, maybe is the right word, or simply not suspected, is that any proper legal system, and Aaron, you can correct me if I'm wrong about American legal system, but I believe it works in that system as well, will admit, at least if you give it a couple drinks and ask it nicely, that ultimately it is not making truth claims. It is making functional claims. So when you declare somebody guilty in a court of law, you're not saying that somehow you have accessed the cheat code of the universe. You're not looking at the world through the lens of the matrix and you can read all of the hidden formulas that tells you with absolute certainty that indeed this person is guilty or this person is not guilty. What you are saying is we have used the system to the best of our ability, and to the best of our ability, this appears to be the situation. And since this appears to be the situation, it is the situation for all legal purposes. And if we got it wrong, well, when we reach the world to come, God will explain what our mistake was and we'll be fine. But in the meantime, all that we can do is the best we can do with the information that we have at our disposal. And occasionally that will lead you to paralysis and you won't be able to do anything. But more often than not, at least within Jewish law, and I believe within American as well, we will use the system with all the tools at our disposal and with our best attempt at finding evidence and using logic to reach a conclusion that seems to be the most appropriate conclusion given the circumstances we're dealing with. And once we've done that, that is what our reality is. That is what our reality will be. And in Jewish law, explicitly, in many circumstances, it'll say, and you never ask again, right? And you never doubt what has been done. That once something has been established by the court as being, especially in family law, this is the relationship, these are the children, this is their lineage, this is their identity, we're done. We do not open up that can ever again. We do not go back casting doubt and aspersions on anything that was there. We have that result as the definition of our reality. And if it doesn't happen to match the real reality, the objective reality from the divine observer, well, we just simply can't access that information. And so we do what we can with what we've got.
All right.
It is very humbling. It is also very empowering. And it's also very terrifying when you realize that the decisions that a court makes are life altering and reality shaping, quite literally.
But Rabbi, the only question I was going to have is, since we're talking about how to figure this stuff out, is going back to American law, it's usually on the burden of the person wanting to do something to make the finding. So, I mean, the only way it really matters in this case with the levirate marriage is that, is the offspring actually going to be the offspring of the brother? And that's the only thing with doubt. So it seems like they assume you married the right one.
Yes, the assumption is, and again, remember, we're dealing with a very rare thought experiment situation here, because obviously under most circumstances, the woman would be able to tell you which one she was engaged to. But yes, the assumption is that the offspring is the heir to the brother of the deceased, the heir to the brother who is deceased of the guy who ended up getting married to her.
Right. And the reason it's actually interesting that you brought up doing the best with what we have. The fact that it seems like it's almost a 50-50 situation. Would the testimony of normally disqualified witnesses be allowed then to swing it one way or another?
Not normally, because their testimony would still not be testimony.
Right, because you said the woman could tell you which one, but her testimony is usually invalid under normal circumstances.
True. I'm not sure whether we would consider that to be testimony rather than simply identification, but that's a good question.
All right. I thought identification.
If my wife points to me across the room and says, "Yeah, that's my husband," I don't think most people say, "I'm not sure. We need to get two men over here to confirm whether that's your husband."
Right.
If it's, in a court of law, if there's disputation, if people are going to say, "Oh no, it isn't," then maybe. But the question would be whether or not anyone would challenge her assertion. So far, no one's challenged my wife about being married to me other than to ask her why. All right. Part 4, I believe we are on from our official scenarios. And so this is the new one that is not exactly paralleled in the Mishnah 6. If this one had 2 brothers and that one had 2 brothers, the brother of this one performs chalitza with one sister, and the brother of that one performs chalitza with one sister. The brother of the one who performed chalitza may take the woman who performed chalitza of the other brother in levirate marriage, and the brother of the second one who performed chalitza may take the chalitza of the other's brother in levirate marriage.
And that was my situation that I asked you before. That's exactly the situation.
But now we have 2 brothers on both sides.
Okay.
Okay, so, and you'll be glad to know this is the final weird situation for tonight. Groom 1, groom 2. Groom 2 has brother 2A, brother 1B. Groom 1 has brother 1A, brother 2B. So what happens? Brother 1A, that's the first brother of groom 1, he does chalitza on sister 1. Brother 2B is then going to marry sister 1. But I should have, back up. Let me do the timeline again. Brother 1A does chalitza on sister 1. Brother 2A does chalitza on sister 2. Brother 2B, right, which means we're offline here, right? So it's the brother is getting married to the woman that the other brother did chalitza to. Right, to the woman that the other brother didn't do chalitza to, right? Brother 2 did chalitza with 2, so brother 2 is getting married to sister 1, and vice versa. Brother 1B is getting married to sister 2 because brother 1A did chalitza to sister 2, to sister 1. So hard to keep track, even with the diagram. Now you can see why I really wanted to go ahead and put the effort into using this little bit of software to try and make this a little bit clearer. Again, sorry for the funny icons. It's just what I had at my disposal. All right, so this works for the same reason that it worked over here when we only had 2 brothers and 1 groom, which is to say that when one brother does chalitza on one woman, it now frees up the potential for the second brother to get married, because now one way or another, he is not getting married to the sister of his potential Yevamot, because either she was just freed by his brother, the real Yevamot, or she wasn't the actual real Yevamot, sister 2 is, and he's getting married to her. So either way, he's in the clear. And because that is happening in the reverse for the other brothers, or the other groom's brothers, that allows them to marry the opposite form. And now we are guaranteed that both grooms have had their brothers marry somebody who will produce a child that will be considered the heir to the 2 deceased grooms. Yay! Okay. See, logic is not only for doing Sudoku.
All the Masechet is like that, or only the beginning?
There's more variety. Don't worry. Okay.
Next time I pick the Masechet, not you, Rabbi.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine. I used to do logic puzzles like this for fun when I was a kid. So it was when you're doing like the logic squares and all of that stuff. So it's just like old times. If the 2 brothers performed chalitza with both wives before consulting the court, right? Oops, they didn't talk to the rabbis. The 2 brothers of the second man may not take sisters in the the 2 brothers of the second man may not take sisters in levirate marriage, lest one marry the sister of a woman with whom he had a levirate bond. Right, so now if they made an oops and you had the 2 brothers and they went ahead and got married, just whichever one they thought was right, without any proper evidence, without any proper understanding of the laws of Yibum or anything else going on, now we are in trouble, right? Because the 2 brothers of the second man, right, that's groom number 2, may not take sisters in levirate marriage, lest one marry a sister of whom he had a levirate bond. Right? Rather, one performs chalitza and one performs levirate marriage, if he so desires. If they marry their wives before consulting the court does not remove them from the marriage. And so if the brothers of groom 1 went ahead and just did chalitza, however they felt like it, you don't just have the 2 brothers of groom 2 jump in and each marry one of the sisters, because that could still be each of them marrying the sister of the one they're supposed to get married to, because the guy was only engaged to one sister. So therefore, they can't both technically be the Yevamot. So instead, we go back to like we had before in the earlier scenario. One of them does chalitza and the other marries the second one. If they mess it up and they don't talk to the court and they just jump in and they do, the 2 brothers of groom 2 marry the 2 women that were potential candidates. Because of the doubt, we don't break up the marriages. We do consider them to be legal marriages that can stand.
So it's always better do it and ask for forgiveness.
No, it's only better if you necessarily want to get married, I suppose. But there's an issue if you knew what you were supposed to do. That is to say, some helpful friend said, you have to talk to the rabbis about this complicated situation because I don't think you're supposed to just both marry whoever you feel like. And you went, who cares what the rabbis say? Now, under certain circumstances, you could get a flogging for that, for rebelling against the words of the rabbis.
Yeah, but if you don't say it's a rebellion and you say, okay, you do what you think is correct, and after that, if you say, oh, oops, I didn't know, sorry, Rabbi, and you say, okay, that's okay, the marriage is still alive, move on.
Yes, and that's, in Jewish law, we have the phrase, lehatchila and b'diavad. And lehatchila means that from the outset, if you are doing things the right way, you should do it like this. B'diavad means if you didn't do it the way we told you in the first place, or if you didn't know the right way to do it in the first place, and you did it a different way, in some circumstances, it will still be okay. It's not the preferred method, and we're still going to tell you that next time you should do it the in advance, from the beginning, from the get-go way, but we're not going to say the other way was wrong. Sometimes, however, doing it your own way absolutely will be invalid. In this case, they got lucky, or they got unlucky because now they're both married and maybe they didn't want to both be married.
Well,
Hey, Rabbi, it's interesting. You said the fact that you don't know what to do starts the obligation to ask the rabbi.
Well, in general, if you don't know what to do about a case of Jewish law, then you should be consulting some rabbinic authority or source. In this particular case, I was saying that if somebody told you that there was a better way to do it, or that the rabbis had a different way to do it, and you deliberately, rebelliously ignored the teachings of our sages, then you would be in trouble for that. All right.
sometimes Rabbi is better, as we say in Hebrew, to play Rosh Katan.
Sometimes. Okay. 2:8. Changing the topic a little bit. It is a mitzvah for the eldest to consummate the Levirate marriage. Remember, technically, consummation, sex, is the way that this gets finalized, not just the normal forms of betrothal, because you are already kind of betrothed once the death happens. And normally, the eldest takes precedence over the other brothers, though they too are obligated. So, all things being equal, all preferences being set aside, the eldest should be the one who does this. But if the younger brother consummated the Levirate marriage first, he acquires the Yevamot as his wife. So technically, if he jumps in and says, yep, I'll marry her, and they are off to the honeymoon suite, technically that's her new husband. And Levirate marriage has been fulfilled, and it is not a sin. Is it going to cause trouble in the family? It could cause trouble in the family, but it's not a marriage that would be dissolved. However, one suspected by others of engaging in sexual relations with a Canaanite maidservant, and she was later set free, or one suspected of relations with a Gentile woman and she subsequently converted, may not marry that woman, since they will strengthen the suspicion against him. You may notice we just changed topics, and we did. Right? As long as we're talking about suspicious unions, not necessarily forbidden, like the younger brother jumping the line. But in this case, in these other cases, there's a different issue. So if somebody is thought to be sleeping with a woman he's not supposed to be, as we're going to see, that's the broader category we have here. The first two cases here are either a Canaanite slave that he owns, or a non-slave but still non-Jewish woman, both of whom he should not be having relations with. If she is later set free or later converted, in the two different cases, he's still not allowed to marry, because it will seem to confirm the suspicions that he was being intimate with her ahead of time. And therefore, once that has risen to a level of public knowledge that he is engaged in these activities, he basically has burnt his bridge to be able to marry her. But if he did marry her, they, meaning the judges of the court, do not remove her from him. That is to say, they do not require him to divorce her. Since it is only a suspicion, and since she now, in these cases, will have reached the level where such a marriage would be valid, right? Marrying a convert is perfectly acceptable, it is not a forbidden union, even if it is one that smells funny, seems a little fishy. It still is one that cannot be dissolved by the court, because it does meet the basic criteria of a legitimate marriage. Aaron.
So just out of curiosity, this would be the situation of Jared Kushner, right?
No.
No.
No. And also, I'm going to speak generically because I don't try to speak specifically to anyone's life experiences that I do not know all the details of. But I do know that sometimes people will discuss, usually incorrectly, the situation where you have a Jewish man who has been familiar with a non-Jewish woman, and after their relationship began, she then converts to Judaism, and then they get married. There are some that will say, well, you know, she only converted for him, or that doesn't seem like it was legitimate, or maybe she wasn't sincere in her conversion, but it was being pressured, right? Those are all things that people might say, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate for a couple of reasons. One, as we saw here, the onus is not on her, the onus is on the groom in the cases of our Mishnah, of the suspicion falling on him, not on the suspicion falling on her. Secondly, although it might be advantageous for her to convert in order to marry, and that might have been a situation in the ancient world, in the modern world, there is nothing preventing two people from getting married if their religions are not the same. In the ancient world, and really up until very recently, you could not find any way to get married outside until we had a secular society that did not involve a religious approval. So you were either getting married by the church or by the mosque or by the synagogue. You were getting married by somebody who was clerical, who was religious in nature. And so an interfaith marriage simply couldn't occur until the modern world. And therefore, conversion for the sake of marriage, in quotes, might have been a real issue or might have been at least a possibility. In the modern world, if two people want to get married and they happen to come from different faiths, they can walk down to City Hall and take care of it in an afternoon. So to imagine that anybody is going through the difficult process of conversion in Judaism for some perceived benefit of accessing the potential for marriage is simply misunderstanding the reality of the modern world. With regards to one who is suspected of illicit relations with a married woman, right? People think that they're having an affair, and the judges of the court, remove her from her husband, right? Require them to divorce due to this. Right? If the court feels that there are enough grounds to believe that there is a validity to the rumors of her having an affair with this other guy, the court could pressure the husband to give his wife a divorce, because keeping that kind of relationship alive in a community was considered very detrimental. Even if the man suspected of the illicit relations subsequently married her, he must divorce her. So if you are the other man who has been so flagrant in his affections with another man's wife that the community forced him to get divorced from the woman who was very obviously an adulteress, but without enough evidence to actually convict them of adultery per se, you cannot get married to her. And if you do, the court will force you to divorce her. And there are no, crime doesn't pay in this case. You do not get to be with the woman that you have committed adultery with once you are divorced. And if you are thinking, therefore, that you would like to marry your neighbor's wife, don't begin acting in ways that are suspicious. Make sure that you've given your intentions to her, make sure she talks to her husband, and keep everything above board and do not get caught, because if you are, you're never going to be able to get married.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Is this divorce, is this what they were talking about in the Sota Mishnah about a bird flying or whatever it was?
This is right, about the suspicion of a woman committing adultery. Yes, it's that level of people are just casually gossiping about the adultery that's taking place. Yes, until the birds are whispering of it. All right, Mishnah.
Now, Rabbi, for the person that tried to marry it and goy, okay, and goy. Goya.
A non-Jew.
A non-Jew, and then they say that he needs to divorce her, or he can't marry. Does he receive any other punishment for the society, like I don't know, any other extra punishment for doing?
Okay, so I mean a case that's not on our list. What happens if a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman?
Yes.
Well, under Jewish law, that's not a marriage.
Okay.
Right? For Jewish law to be applicable, and marriage is part of Jewish law, both parties have to be bound by Jewish law.
Correct.
Right? If I'm playing baseball and somebody throws a football across the field, even if I catch it, I can't say I got a touchdown, right? Because I'm playing a different sport. I'm playing by a different set of rules. So in Jewish law, if two people get married and one is Jewish and one is not, they are not married according to Jewish law. Secular law, American law, yes, of course, that's obviously true. But as far as Jewish law is concerned, they're not married, and therefore they wouldn't even need to give a get, the official Jewish divorce, because there was no Jewish marriage to be dissolved. Obviously, in the modern world, you would still have to give a secular divorce. Of course, we comply with American laws. However, in the ancient world, if a man was to act like he was married, that is to say, to treat a non-Jewish woman as though she were her wife, even though according to Jewish law she couldn't be, and there was no secular marriage institutions in the ancient world, would there be societal pressure for him to separate from her? Absolutely. And would the community choose to put more and more pressure on him, ever escalating, as we've talked about before, of forms of censure and other disapproval? Absolutely.
But physical punishment?
Potentially, yes. Potentially, for his rebelliousness, for, going against the mitzvah of being with women that are prohibited, or a woman that is prohibited, yes. That would have been potentially possible in some communities. All right. Whoops. Sorry, my computer just warned me that the battery is running low. Okay. We're almost done for tonight. Anyway, I think we can get through 9 just fine. And we'll take it, we'll probably wrap it up there. Although maybe 10 too, because it's good to finish the chapter. Let's go. An agent who brought a bill of divorce from a country overseas and said, "It was written in my presence and it was signed in my presence," as required in order to establish the bill of divorce as valid, may not marry the wife. That is to say, the divorcee. Since the validity of the bill of divorce is based upon his testimony, marrying the divorcee creates the impression that he had an ulterior motive for his testimony. Right? Some guy shows up and says, "Oh yeah, her husband over in France, he divorced her, and I've got the get right here. That proves it." And they say, "Oh well, who's the witness of it?" "Well, I was the witness of it." "Okay, so she's divorced." "Oh, and I'm going to marry her." "No, you're not." No, you're not, because that makes it look like you either forged the documents or in some other way connived to make this happen. And no, that is too much. That rises to a level of suspicion that we are not comfortable with. Similarly, a witness who testified that a certain man died, or testified, "I killed him," or "we killed him," the group, may not marry that man's wife. Now you might wonder, why would she want to marry her husband's killer? Depends on the relationship she had with her husband. But the issue here again is that it seems like his testimony, not the murder per se, but his testimony is suspect. Perhaps he is only saying that the husband is dead, or even that he killed him, in order to make the woman a widow legally and then marry her when the husband might be alive and fine somewhere else. Rabbi Yehuda says, if he testified, "I killed him," his wife may not be married, meaning at all, to anyone based on that evidence, as his testimony is unreliable. Generally speaking, we don't take the one person's witness in their own testimony for their crime. But if he said, "We killed him," his wife may be married, to anyone other than those witnesses. Meaning if there is multiple witnesses that say, we as a group committed the act against him, then she is at least permitted to get married to other people, but she cannot get married to any of the people who are testifying that they participated in the killing. And continuing the idea of people who have mixed motives and therefore need rulings, a sage who refused to release a woman from a vow that rendered the wife forbidden to her husband by that vow, resulting in her being divorced from her husband, may not marry her, so as to avoid suspicion that he rendered her forbidden to her husband in order to marry her himself. So we haven't done nedarim, done vows, but a person who makes a foolish vow, for example, I will no longer derive benefit from my husband until the moon until the moon lands on Earth, right? And the sage that she goes to be released from that vow, because there is a way to cancel a vow that was made in error, says, you know what? I don't think you made that vow in error. I think that vow was meant to be legitimate. You're not getting off the hook. You are no longer allowed to benefit from your husband until the conditions are met. Well, those conditions can never be met. And that basically means that her husband has to divorce her. In such a situation, the sage is not allowed to marry her, because it would seem like the sage had deliberately refused to nullify the vow just so that she would be forced to be divorced, and thus he'd be able to marry her. In fact, maybe he set her up to do the whole vow in the first place in order to concoct the situation. Again, there's enough suspicion that he is not allowed to get in line to marry her. However, a judge before whom a woman performed refusal, remember we talked about this issue of a woman who was betrothed when she was a minor being allowed to refuse to marry the man once she reaches maturity. The judge who was there and who was the witness presiding over that issue, or before whom she performed chalitza, bringing us back on topic, may marry her because he was only one member of the court, thereby alleviating suspicion. He was participated in the process, but he wasn't the one who was the final arbiter. He was not a single person who made the decision. He was part of a group that was simply making sure it was done correctly. And for all of these who were involved in permitting the wife to remarry, meaning the judge, the agent who brought the bill of divorce, and the one who testified for a woman that her husband died, if they had wives at the time of the ruling or the testimony, and their wives died thereafter, then those women they had set free are permitted to be married to them. So the issue was that if they had a wife while they were doing their official capacity, bringing testimony, giving evidence, being a judge, if they were married at that time, then the assumption is there is no concern that while their wives were still alive, these individuals set their eyes upon another woman. Again, we're talking about the majority of cases that if they were already married, we don't think of them as conniving to take a second wife in one of these manners. So therefore, we allow them, once their wife has died, the wife that was with them when they were involved in this case, to go ahead and get married. And with regards to all of these women who are prohibited from marrying a certain man due to some suspicion, if they were subsequently married to others and then were divorced or widowed from the second husband, they are permitted to be married to them, the judge's messenger witness who permitted her to remarry. So if she got married to someone in the meantime, and then she got freed again, either by divorce or widowhood, then the judge, witness, or other person who normally wouldn't have married her because of suspicion now is allowed to marry her. So yes, if you can make this happen a couple of times in a row, technically you can end up being with the person. By the way, that suspected adulterer never gets an opportunity. And all of those women whom were prohibited from marrying due to some suspicion are permitted to the sons or to the brothers of those who set them free. We are not going to extend the suspicion to the rest of the family, only to the individual involved. And that brings chapter 2 to its conclusion.
Hey, Rabbi,
Yes.
I had a question. In 2:9, you said the testimony would be inadmissible because confessions to a crime are inadmissible. But I thought they were only inadmissible in a criminal trial. Since it would be a civil trial, how come the confession wouldn't be admitted since it was made in open court?
Right, but this confession is the confession of murder, which is a criminal trial.
Oh, I thought he was making the statement as part of a divorce proceeding. Or not divorce proceeding, but a proceeding to remarry.
Right, but in order to do so, he has to be confessing to the murder.
Yeah.
Or to the killing, which could have been, remember, manslaughter. It didn't have to be like cold-blooded, I jumped out from behind a tree and cut his head off.
Right, but I thought it could be, I thought they separated the two standards. They say, well, this evidence is not valid for this issue, but it's still valid for issue B. They don't separate it like that?
No, in this case, because of the criminality involved, they are not giving him permission to marry while also denying him the guilt of the murder. It's either his status as the killer and his status as the only testimony to the death of the victim has to be corroborated, or else he's not allowed to get married.
All right, because I thought
to this particular woman.
All right. So I thought we went over that in some of the rape cases where, you could be forbidden to marry based on certain evidence, even though it doesn't meet the criminal standard. So it wouldn't be like that in this case, huh? No. All right.
All right. So we will pick up with chapter 3, which is a different topic. Right? We're going back to Chalitza. We are going to get back into some complicated families. Not too complicated, I promise. It's not as bad as 6 and 7 were in chapter 2. But it should still keep your brain working hard. All right. Take care, everyone. Be well, and see you all soon. One way or another.
Bye.
Bye bye. I see you tomorrow.